Yo fans, Matt here, and welcome to the first episode of a new discussion series called Countering the Meta. This series is going to discuss how to counter certain decks that are getting a lot of popularity or a lot of meta status, or going to be a massive problem in the future, such as Magic Spectre, Monarchs, and today will be PSY-Frame. So yeah, let's go straight onto that with PSY-Frame itself. PSY-Frame is a hand trap oriented archetype which basically negates everything you do and is very reactive to what you do, unless they have the PSY-Frame overload, which is proactive. Their synchro options are very powerful, making your Exceed monsters more or less dead, and you lose all control of your hand when Omegas are out, and you can combo both of those synchros into a devastating combo which will just destroy your hand card by card. Plus they have access to some old cards like Psychic Field Zone, Psychic Path, which allow them to regain their advantage on Synchro Summon from the Banishment Zone. They have to have a vanilla in their deck, which is the key card of their deck, because if they don't have that in their deck, they can't play the deck. So a lot of people would want to banish all drivers, but that means if they have a partner like a Gamma or a Beta or an Alpha or a Delta or an Epsilon in that Banishment Zone, they are subject to Psychic Field Zone, and Psychic Path gets around that anyway. Plus they have access to Lose One Turn. This is a very powerful anti-meta archetype which is getting a lot of success at the moment. I was at LLDS at the weekend, and PSY-Frame used Senju came joint first, so yeah, it's very powerful and it's already getting a lot of representation. So let's go on to what decks you can see right now. So we've got the pure version, which is more or less just going to be everything like this, with the field spells, maybe some chicken games in there, and Wind Up Rabbit as their beatdown. And there are hybrid versions, as I said. There is a Yosenju version, which is very deadly because it combines the swarming abilities of Yosenjus, which can beat you down quite effectively if you just go into a very slow play. Or it can brick. It can brick at times, but they can easily bring out a 1600 which is going to bounce back and then let you have problems on your turn. And then there's also a Magic Spectre version of PSY-Frame, which is going to be more inconsistent, but is based around their trap and spell lineup that tributes their Magic Spectres off, allowing the field to be free and have even further negation, which is very powerful and could see more play in November. And then there's a Spirit-like version, which is just which could be like Yaksha as an MST that you can keep summoning and just slow down your options. There's going to be more hybrids as the deck progresses. Maybe Kaijus, we don't know. It's going to be very powerful, and which it already is now, and is going to be very annoying. So I know a lot of people will probably be wanting to out this deck or side for this deck, because it's going to be a very tough option for most decks that don't have something that can stop hand traps. So the main 5 ways I believe that you can stop a PSY-Frame deck are thusly. The first is back row hate, which would be MSTs and Galaxy Cyclones somewhat, but usually they would sign in like Imperial Iron Wall, because most decks that use Galaxy Cyclone are going to be subject to Imperial Iron Wall. So yeah, that doesn't really help that much. The positives of using back row hate against PSY-Frame are that you can get away their powerful continuous cards like their PSY-Frame Circuit, which allows you to immediately synchro summon, or Honest Effect, Overload, which banishes your cards, or Lose One Turn, which fucks up most Exceed decks. Not to mention that if you combo it with a card that can return those just sent cards to the deck, it can further decrease their consistency, and it will stop Overload from searching and being abused. Omega is the option I am giving right now because it is a generic synchro that any deck can do, but you could also use Transmigration Prophecy. Unfortunately, there are always going to be negatives. That is basically the overload grave search that is very powerful and can be very abused if they get a synchro on board. And they are subject to PSY-Framegear Delta, which can negate spell cards, which is going to be very powerful in the upcoming Pendulum formats. The next option you could go for is floodgates. Floodgates are always around, and they're always going to be a continuous threat. The main floodgate that is going to be useful against PSY-Frame is Mind Drain. That's basically stops you activating effects of monsters in the hand, which means they can't use any PSY-Frame card, and they would have to out it with their trap card or a synchro that's already on the field, maybe go into a Scrap Dragon or something like that and try and blow it away. But if you do get Mind Drain out early enough and without them having an overload, then you've got a lot of free will to just beat them down. So continuous threat, yes. But unfortunately there is negatives. Two other floodgates that you could use, which are Mistake and Imperial Iron Wall, they can actually side in because Imperial Iron Wall doesn't hurt them. It just means they can't really fuck up your field play and your hand plays, but it means they will have their materials on board to make synchro summons and recuperate their losses very effectively. Not to mention that they can use Mistake. It's more likely they're going to use Mistake and Arrest to actually combat you, but they're not 100% hindered by a Mistake. Mind Drain does have more versatility, but unfortunately Mind Drain is not really a generic card. You could put it up against Necros, but Mistake is a lot more effective than a Mind Drain, so you'll have to side in a dead card for more or less every other matchup. Well, have a side card. You'll just take out slots that you really could use for something else, so Mind Drain doesn't have that versatility. Not to mention that they also can side in Royal Decree or side Epsilon, and since this is not a counter trap or Royal Decree doesn't differentiate between that, but side frame Epsilon does, it will be destroyed and nullified depending on which option they go for. And I think that's it. Imperial Iron Wall talks about. The third option is one of the options I'm currently using in my main deck, because my main deck actually has this option, and that is Effect Negation. This is because I'm playing Infernoid more or less as my competitive deck at the moment, so I always have a main deck Skill Drain, which is very dangerous. I went against a PSY-Frame opponent last Saturday and flipped over Skill Drain. It turned into a massive grind game, which he was very surprised at. Infernos don't grind, but in that case they did. It was very powerful, although I didn't win the game because I misplayed at the end. It really did protect me, and it is very powerful. Not to mention that Fiendish Chain can definitely fuck up their plays if they're running the Yosenji lineup or the Wind-Up lineup, because that will keep them on the field. They can't activate their hand traps because they need to. Their requirements are no monsters on the field, so that is quite good in that respect. However, they also subject to PSY-Framegear Epsilon and Royal Decree, so keep that in mind. Not to mention that Skill Drain is got low runability. Not every deck, quite a lot of decks can't run this. Burning Abyss is one of the best decks right now that can run it. Same for Infernoid, and it's just very powerful. And Cleavor, I forgot about them. But Fiendish Chains are quite generic. You could use Breakthrough Skill, but it will only help you twice, which is not going to be that effective. And yes, on to option 4, which is Counter Traps. This is my main force I'm using in PSY-Frame right now, and that's because it is very effective. Counter Traps can't be responded by their PSY-Framegear Epsilon, so if they did side that in, that would be completely useless because you got Counter Traps. So yeah, that's one of the main positives of that. Debunk would negate their effects and banish them, so it can have a little unfortunate synergy with Psychic Field Zone, but if you're banishing the right cards and keeping the drivers out of that area, then you would have some way of stopping them there. Also, Chivalry is another option which I have used quite effectively. Is because of PSY-Framegear beta. Not every deck is going to be subject to a PSY-Frame deck to be a very bad matchup for them. Some decks can just summon a monster and keep beating them down without using anything else, and in theory that does work. But it should be backed up by a Chivalry, because Chivalry is going to be the only safe zone that you have, because when the only thing they'll be able to use, except from Alpha, on their summon, is a beta. And Chivalry negates that and destroys it. So that's very good, and will shut down quite a few of their plays. I have been successful with using Chivalry and Debunk in my side deck against PSY-Frames. So yeah, that's very good. And not to mention that Chivalry is a great card for the Cosmo matchup, so it is not going to be much of a dead card in your side deck for other matchups. Same for Debunk, it can be used against Necros, Mermail, Shaddoll, so many decks Debunk can hit. So they're not dead as like Mandarin would. However, there are negatives, and one of these negatives I actually went against, which is Wiretap. They could side this in if they think they're going to be getting countered by counter traps. So they can Wiretap your Debunks back into your deck and, yeah, gain control again. Or Dark Bribe, which is lesser used, but is still a threatening card. And the final option that I have thought of, this is not a definitive list, I should mention. If you do have any suggestions for other options I should have gone through, please leave them down below in the comments, how I'd like to hear them. And the fifth option is playing slow. This stops PSY-Frame Alpha because they have to be normal summoned or special summoned. They can't be flip summoned to gain alpha searches. So you could just set your monster and pass, and then flip summon it, and then go for the bait, and then go to stop. Only be beaten down by beta, which would be where Chivalry comes into. But with the arrival of Yosenju PSY-Frames, and I think there's going to be other PSY-Frame variants, they'll be able to beat down your defensive monsters, and that will shut down your plays and mean you just basically gone -1. So yeah, not to mention that if you're going very slow and you're going to give them a lot of card advantage, so when you're in a dire situation you won't be able to get out of that dire situation. Not to mention that most PSY-Frame decks run a normal summonable monster just so they can beat down somewhat. Wind Up Rabbit is the most commonly used, so always be careful with that. You can't stall them out in most cases, because they will draw into something they can summon, or they will draw into the field zone, or they'll draw into Overload, because Overload will this will destroy your field, get fodder for Psychic Field Zone, and then they will take control of the duel. Not to mention that some people could be evil and put in really powerful side deck cards that just completely ruin stalls, which is, well, the most suggested one is Wave Motion Cannon, which we all know from the old formats is very powerful. You just send it after a couple of turns and you do like 4,000 damage, depending on how many turns and if it's still face up by that time. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this little episode on how to counter PSY-Frames. As I said, not a definitive list, but hopefully this will give you some ideas for when you go get PSY-Frame, if you think there's going to be a lot of PSY-Frame hype at your locals, or depending on where you're going to be playing at. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this. Please leave your comments below if you've got any suggestions for the series, if you've got a deck you would like to see be deconstructed by countering and how to counter it. Please like that below in the comments. I'm not really going to be going for Necros and Shaddoll and all those stuff that are real meta right now, because we all know how to counter them more or less, and there's going to be a lot of information right now that is going to counter it, so they're not that applicable. But if you do really want to see them, just leave them below in the comments. And yeah, I'll get around to them. And yeah, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, enjoy this, or see further content. Madarad signing.